Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Here's your host, Morgan Colby and Rick Lemon.
Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Every episode, I feel like I say podcast like I'm sitting on the toilet trying to push out a crap. Do you feel that?
On that note, I'm going to take off my sunglasses. I'm just going to pretend you didn't say that.
Was that disturbing?
Yeah, a little bit.
The sunglasses kind of made you look like you were hungover a little bit. My name's Morgan Colby. I got Rick Lemon with me, as always. We got a fun episode today. Last episode, we did PPR rankings to start the fun breakdown as we enter the month of July. I think this series of episodes will bring us into the month of July. Now, we did do a running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, and quarterbacks rankings episode all the way back in March or May, April, I can't remember, during COVID quarantining. And it was the early rankings. So what you're going to get in this episode and in the next couple episodes are the top 12 at each position. And then the rest of them, the full rankings for drafts and cheat sheets and all that stuff will be in our draft guide. So you should purchase that and check them out when it goes live on July 1st. But anyway, yes. So today we're going to talk about some news, some running back rankings. Before we do that, check out our website at thefantasychampions.com. Follow us on Twitter at the FF Champs, on Instagram at the Fantasy Champions. Like us at facebook.com/the Fantasy Champions. Subscribe wherever you listen. Please, 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 I beg you to leave a review. Grow the brand and leave a review.
Even if it's a bad review.
Even if it's horrible. Share this podcast with your friends. Rick, do you want to tell us about the draft guide?
Look, how many times do I say
it's
how much
so
effort
much
that
work,
goes into
so
this
much
thing?
effort.
But if you guys want to know what gets included, there's full rankings, there's breakdowns, busts, player draft values, player breakdowns, and so much more. Make sure you guys get this thing before July 1st when the price goes up. It's definitely worth it. And by the way, if you guys pre-order now, there's still time to do it. You will be entered for a chance to be in our listener league that we're going to do.
Yep.
And see if you can beat us.
Unlikely. $25 is the purchase price.
We'll see. Just because you said that, somebody's going to mark this down, and they'll beat you in the listener league, and then just keep playing it. And they'll send you a clip
totally
of it over and over again.
Totally unlikely, though, because I'm,
Yeah, is that so? I mean, if anyone's going to beat you, we know.
It's funny because I told myself like a month ago, right when the NFL draft or something, was that a month ago? I don't remember. But I told myself like a month, 2 months ago, this year only going to be in four fantasy leagues total, 1 or 2 dynasty, 1 or 2 redraft, and we'll be good, right? So right now I'm totaling at 5.
Uh-oh.
And I haven't even hit August, so that's a problem.
Yeah,
already breaking my own rule.
Once August comes around, you're going to just join like 2 or 3 just by accident.
I can't remember. One of our writers on our staff said that he knows somebody in 40 something fantasy leagues. I think it was Kevin Coleman.
40 plus.
I'm all set with that. I like
to. Some people, commitment, though.
It is commitment. Some people might be like, why aren't you in more leagues? Like, you need to be in as many leagues as possible. I'm like, no, I like to focus on the leagues that I'm in instead of just,
trying to spread
be confused and use Fantasy Pros.
No, I'm with you on that one.
Did you see Fantasy Pros has a new website?
I did not.
They updated. It's kind of pretty looking. I was so confused. I'm like, did I go to the right website? It's brand spanking new, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm the last one to see it. Let's get to the news, my friend. So this actually has ramifications on Myles Sanders, and we are going to talk about him today, and I might move him down my rankings because of this. Eagles Eagles right guard, Brandon Brooks, the right guard that was rated as the best guard in all of football by PFF, tore his Achilles tendon, and he's going to miss the entire 2020 season. So their best offensive lineman, arguably, is out for the season, which is huge news.
Yeah, that's a really tough loss for the Eagles.
Not just for Myles Sanders, but for the passing game, for everything. So, I mean, do you think the Eagles take obviously football-wise is a big hit, but do you think fantasy-wise this is a huge hit to the skill players of the Eagles? Or
I think it could be a hit to Sanders.
Mostly?
For his running efficiency-wise.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit to Wentz, too. I heard that the Eagles are actually interested in Joe Thuney, the Patriots. I don't know if
they would trade for him.
Yeah, but there's rumors right now that they're going after him. So if they can get a replacement for him, I think it definitely.
Yeah, I mean that would be a fantastic addition. But yeah, because it's what is that? He's on a franchise tag, so it's a rental almost.
Right.
A very expensive rental, but a rental nonetheless.
But as of right now, yeah, that is a big loss for the Eagles, and it should be noted for Myles Sanders owners.
Now, I have Myles Sanders right now at 4.4 yards per carry and 10 yards per reception in terms of efficiency rating. So, I mean, you could probably pull those down to 4.2, 4.3.
I mean, he'll still be good. Yeah. Like if you give him, if he's going to get the amount of work that a lot of people think he's going to get, then he'll be fine with those numbers.
No, I think the Eagles had an offensive line missing last year too, and he was still efficient. Yeah. So, I mean, it could be. But it's a sad loss for them. Wednesday, Vikings offensive coordinator Gary Kubiak said that first-round wide receiver Justin Jefferson is going to move inside to the slot quite a bit. So it looks like they're going to have Thielen and Justin Jefferson ruling the slot with quite literally nobody on the outside.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting to see. I think they might just switch the two off. But they also have a lot of two wide receiver sets anyway, so I don't know how. I don't really know what
the plan
Vikings, is. Yeah, but either way, they're going to use Justin Jefferson, whether it's in the slot or on the outside.
I don't think year one he's going to have a massive impact, but really, obviously, yeah. No, I don't.
See, I actually am the opposite. I think he might have the biggest impact for any rookie wide receiver year one.
Yeah, I disagree.
Just because there's other than Adam Thielen, who's their third receiver.
That's fair, but. I don't know. I mean, I have him projected at 97 targets with 126 fantasy points next year.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's going to... I have him at like 130. I think 133 fantasy points, so I'm not really that far off from him.
Yeah, I mean, in that regard, it's that's wide receiver 4 range. So it's not.
I mean, I don't project any rookie though, except
no, right. There are some other guys that when I was projecting, I was kind of surprised by how much opportunity that they will get, but I don't like this class is good, but it's not,
Well, there's going to be, there are, I think, going to
be at least for
a
year
player
one
or two that's going to finish in like the top 30 for receivers, but it'll probably be random. Like last year, Terry McLaurin. I mean, I don't know if he finished there because he missed some time, but he played like a top 30 fantasy receiver. DK Metcalf too, so it wasn't like the first guys off the board like N'Keal Harry or Hollywood Brown.
The trend is that it takes most of the season for a guy to figure himself out, and then it's like
and AJ Brown too,
like Metcalf, AJ Brown. Terry McLaurin was good at the start of the season and kind of faded at the end, but actually he was still, I don't know, he was the same injured, for pretty much Debo too towards the end of the season was a lot better. Speaking of Debo, he suffered a broken left foot during a workout with teammates on Tuesday. It's unbelievable. It is expected that he will be sidelined for 3 to 4 months. Now, that's a lot longer than what some people have talked about. That's the long term.
Yeah, I've heard 10
injury.
Weeks.
I've heard 10 weeks as well, which would put him right in line for week 1. But I don't know if they're going to rush him back. Obviously, you don't really have to. I'm not going to change my projections on Debo. I'm going to keep him the same as if he's playing a full season.
I'm going to as well. I might move him down a spot or two in my rankings.
Yeah. So not good news for Debo. Foot injuries, especially for wide receivers, are difficult injuries to A, recover from, and B, they linger.
I had just drafted Debo in our mock draft too in the last show, and I was like feeling all good.
It's all your fault.
It's like, I know. Really is. I caused this.
The NFLPA has recommended against its members working out together as a number of COVID-19 cases increase in many states. That's just a player association. The NFL could give a rat's tootie. Honestly, I was reading through the notes and all the coronavirus stuff that people have been talking about. I don't mean to sound completely indifferent to coronavirus. Like, it's a real disease and it's a problem. We talked about that before, right? But I feel like people are just totally done with it, and they don't care anymore. They want to get back to life.
There's a lot of people that are like that, yeah.
And there's some people who are freaking out about it. But right now, for me, the only people that are really making a huge deal out of COVID-19 anymore are organizations and like news companies. I feel like normal people in life are not like.
Yeah, unless it's like like someone in your family is really high risk. I think they're still like
right. But I like there are people talking.
But yeah, the general public, I agree with you. They don't really care.
Yeah. So anyway, Dak Prescott signed his franchise tender. Apparently, right now the difference for Dak Prescott and the Cowboys is not with money for a long-term contract. It's that Dak wants 4 years and the Cowboys want 5. So that is the separation at this point.
Dak wants
just
4
suck
and the
the
Cowboys
heck
want
up
5?
And sign him for 4 years. Like, who the heck cares? Like, yeah. And then do the negotiations in 3 years again. Like, this, whatever.
Right.
Anyway, so he signed his franchise tender. He's going to report. I'm assuming that there's going to be a contract done within the next month or two. So it'll be resolved before the season starts. But I don't think Amari Cooper is going to be a Cowboy, to be honest with you. I think the last of the money is going to go to Dak.
Oh, yeah, I agree. I think he'll be, since they drafted CeeDee Lamb, he'll be a Cowboy for this year.
Yeah.
2021 and beyond, I don't know.
The Seahawks and the Ravens have had some internal discussions about signing free agent Antonio Brown. Last week we talked about how Brown wasn't going to even get a team, and now there's 2 teams interested. If he signs with the Seahawks, that crushes DK Metcalf. And B, if he signs with the Ravens to play with his cousin Marquise Brown, I think that probably kills the Ravens Marquise Brown fantasy wise this year as well. So
it might boost Lamar though. But the problem is even
I don't
team. What are the chances he gets cut by like week 3?
I haven't heard anything from him. Like, usually he's on social media all the time. He's been pretty radio silent. So,
I don't know.
I don't know if he's back. Like,
I'm really kind of just like
not normal, but like,
I don't think a team should sign him. I don't think he will, but if he does, then he does.
It won't have immediate impact either. When he signs, you'll react to it.
Yeah, like because now I'm just kind of like I still don't really think he's going to go anywhere. But if he does end up signing with the Ravens or the Seahawks, then I'll kind of have my initial thoughts about it. But I think there's still a chance, even if he signs with one of these teams, he'll get cut. So,
let's move into our running back rankings. Excuse me. This is going to be interesting. An interesting little episode. We have 2 different guys on our lists, and then everything else generally stays the same. So the last person we talk about is going to be the separating factor. I think both of us have either one of these guys separated by 1 spot. So we might talk about 13 players. Who knows? But these are our, not consensus, but our individual top 12 running backs. We're going to talk about a list of players and then tell you where we ranked them. So let's start off with number 1, the consensus number 1 for both me and you and everyone else is CMC, Christian freaking McCaffrey. It should be no surprise that he is the 101. So the interesting thing that I found with Christian McCaffrey is that before I did my projections, back when we did the early running back rankings, I believe I had Saquon Barkley 1. And you said on our last show, you were like, I projected Christian McCaffrey, and you said, "Oh, is it a lot?" And I said, "No, but it is."
It is, yeah.
So, but for me, I just want to tell you what my projections are for him, so you understand what's going on. Right now, I do have him projected as the number 1 running back in all of fantasy football, but I have him at 250 attempts on the ground, 80 receptions through the air. So that is a pretty large, for what you're looking at, comparatively to last year's numbers, that's a large regression that I gave him.
That is a large. That's 30 less catches.
And yet he still scores 329 fantasy points on my projections. So I think the big thing for him is that he's going to, with the receiving volume that he gets in half PPR and PPR leagues, you can't beat it. In standard leagues, Barkley might be rivaling Christian McCaffrey, and in standard leagues, I might rank Saquon as 1. But right now, Christian McCaffrey, just as efficient as he is as a runner, and the fact that he's on a terrible football team, or at least what was a terrible football team last year, still scored as many touchdowns as he did, still was efficient as he was. Even if he regresses, he's still the running back 1. I don't think he's going to get over 400 fantasy points like he did last year in half PPR. I believe he hit that total.
No, I mean, that's
absurd. So yeah, I think there's a chance that Barkley could outscore him, but for me, I don't want to be an idiot sitting at pick number 1 and not take Christian McCaffrey because I'm just being stubborn, or I think he's going to regress. Right. I do think Mike Davis, I mean, they could be in the market for a running back, but I think Mike Davis might get a little more work than people think he is. We have to remember Ron Rivera is not there anymore. And so the days of 400 touches for Christian McCaffrey are probably gone by the wayside at this point. But I think as efficient as he is, he's as safe as it can get at the running back position.
Yeah, I don't know if he's going to get 400 touches, but he still might get like 350.
I think he hit 400 last year. I don't quote me on it. I'm going to look. But what are your thoughts on CMC?
Close to 400. Actually, you know what? He did hit 400. Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Absurd.
Yeah, I mean, I have him at regression a little bit too.
He was at
a little bit.
Holy frick, you're right.
Yeah, it was over 400. But when a guy has 1,000 yards receiving
and 1,000 yards rushing,
1,400 yards rushing, it's hard to not take him number 1 overall the next year. And the team pretty much stayed the same. They got better at quarterback with Teddy Bridgewater. They added Robbie Anderson, so the offense is actually a little bit better. New coaching staff though is a little concerning, but it's Christian McCaffrey. Like if this was like a regular player, you'd be like, oh, how are they going to use him in the offense now with the new coaching staff? But it's like, how are we going to use Zeke? But it's how they're going to use Zeke. It's because it's Zeke. Right. And you wouldn't be saying that with Barkley either. So I think McCaffrey's obviously in that same category. So the Panthers are still going to use McCaffrey a lot. And I'm not saying he's going to get 1,400 yards rushing and 1,000 yards receiving again. Yeah. But if he gets like 800 yards receiving and like 1,100 rushing yards, he's still going to be the RB1.
I think right now I have him at 1,100 rushing yards and 600 receiving yards, so around 1,800 and change. And
he was still the number 1 guy on your projections, right?
Yeah.
It's McCaffrey. Don't be stupid. Don't pass up a chance to get literally a PPR. My
only concern is that, and I have this very same concern I'll talk about in a few minutes with Zekiel Elliott, that he's going to get a massive regression in workload. But I just think that
he's going to get a massive regression?
No, that he could get a massive regression. When I say massive, I mean 225 attempts, like 70 targets and 50 receptions. Like if something like that happens, then you're talking about him being in the 270 range for fantasy points, which is still top 5. But I don't think that happens. I just don't. So it's as simple as that. I don't know. For me, it's hard because I'm like, I've been waiting for the Christian McCaffrey collapse for a while now for some reason. I don't know what it is, but
it's just more you than me.
Draft CMC 1.
Yeah. He's only 24 too, so it's not like he's old.
I think the only major concern that I would have is that he's not injury prone in the least. He's healthy. He's good in that department, but I don't want to say a player's due. But if CMC gets that much workload,
it's hard to play 16 games every year when you get 400 touches. Right. That's for anybody.
So let's move on to the second guy we have that we're going to talk about, Saquon Barkley. He is my 2.
He's my 2 as well.
He's your 2. Barkley is an interesting guy. Like I said, I had him 1. And I really liked him 1. Now, there is concerns for me in the department of, they brought in a brand new coach, Joe Judge, who essentially I think he was a special teams coordinator for the Pats. He's worked in the offensive side of the football for a majority of his career coaching. So, and being under Bill Belichick for all of those years, it would lead me to believe that they would go more committee than they did last year. I didn't project like that because I know that when there's a talented guy, Joe Judge comes from a system where they say, use the players how they're supposed to be used. And Barkley really does everything. So not too concerned about Barkley in that respect. I think their offense is getting better over time. So I think that kind of helps Barkley. I had projected him actually at more rushing attempts than Christian McCaffrey.
Really?
I have him at 45 receptions, 64 targets, and he totals out at 294 fantasy points. I could probably project him for maybe a few more rushing touchdowns, but 294 is where he's at. I think I have him as number 2 on my projections as well as my rankings. So I think that with Jason Garrett, right now we're assuming that he's going to be the play caller for the Giants. And where did he come from? A system where they just fed the ball to Zeke.
Right.
So you can see that with Saquon, and I think that's what's going to happen. I mean, you want to hear the next closest guy on the Giants that I have projected for rush attempts?
Who?
Dion Lewis at 37.
Yeah, see, I had the same thing with, the Panthers. I had Mike Davis at, 35 carries.
Yeah.
I gave Dion Lewis, I think, 50 carries with the Giants, so a little bit more than you, but still nowhere near Barkley.
Yeah.
And with Barkley, they added Andrew Thomas, the 4th overall pick, to tackle, so their offensive line is going to at least be a little bit better. And if Daniel Jones can play, then that's going to take a lot of pressure off Barkley because teams were just focusing on Barkley last year, especially when Eli Manning was playing quarterback. They would just stack the box and just put all focus on Barkley.
Right.
But if Daniel Jones can play well with the new offensive line, I think Barkley, that could be a big thing for Barkley. He's also, some people might be hesitant on drafting him if they took him 1 last year, and then he kind of didn't have the best year because of the ankle injury. And because of that, he could come back even better this year. And you could get him with the 3rd or 4th overall pick and shock everybody.
Yeah, that's fair. Safe pick at...
I think he's the only guy who I think could pass McCaffrey. He's the number 1.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Unless there's some kind of dark horse, you could see, and I'm not saying this is going to happen at all. So don't be like, oh, he said this was going to happen, and then you draft him with the first pick. Don't be idiots. But you could see maybe a dark horse guy like Myles Sanders, Kenyan Drake. I could even see possibly, depending on what happens with the Browns offense or the Raiders offense, Chubb or Josh Jacobs. It just, somebody could ascend into that spot. But
I mean, this is less on the down low, but I think Kamara has a really good shot of being the RB1 this year as well.
Well, let's talk about that guy next, Alvin Kamara.
Okay.
So you have him 4.
I do.
I have him 3. Let me just explain why I have him 3. So I wish I went with this hot take last year, but you know what it was? I had the 2nd pick in the draft, and I was biasly trying to tell myself to draft Alvin Kamara last year. And
you could have took McCaffrey, but
was McCaffrey on the board?
He fell to 4.
So mad. I'm mad about that. But anyway, so McCaffrey, Kamara is big. I ended up settling on Zeke in our draft last year. And the reason, not settling, but I ended up taking Zeke. And the reason was because the way I look at fantasy football in a lot of ways is, what gets you the most consistency? And so for me, when I looked at, Kamara and Zeke, which were, in my mind, the 2 options for me at that spot outside of, I took McCaffrey and I put him in a box. But so with Kamara and Zeke being those 2 guys on the board that I wanted, I looked at, how many yards do they get on the ground, receptions do they get, how many fantasy points come from that, and then I looked at how many fantasy points came from touchdowns. And do you know that Alvin Kamara has never reached 1,000 yards rushing or 1,000 yards receiving in his career?
Yep.
And I looked at that and I was like, so if he takes a hit in the touchdown totals in 2019, he could actually be a lot worse than people expect. I'll tell you right now, it was not the injuries that Alvin Kamara... Yes, it was the injuries that hurt his efficiency. But I think it wasn't injuries that stopped Kamara from being really good last year. It was that they weren't scoring as many rushing touchdowns. And that's what I kind of was projecting before the season, but I was too afraid to say it because Kamara is Kamara. Yeah. So this year, I think he's still not going to reach 1,000 rushing. He's still not going to reach 1,000 receiving yards. But I have him statted out right now at 80 receptions, and that seems like a lot.
I think I have him at 75.
But he's very efficient through the air, and in a half PPR league, he's probably going to get 600-700 receiving yards, 900 plus rushing yards. The big question is, does he hit 15 total or more touchdowns all-purpose next year? If he does, then you're talking about a running back who could possibly end up in the top 3, maybe like you said, number 1 overall. The possibility of that happening is there, but it's hard to, for me, the reason why I have him at 3 is more specifically because I think the touchdowns will come back. I think, I have concerns about Zeke, which we'll talk about in a second. But I think Kamara is going to get the work. He's going to get the opportunity, and he has the efficiency to be able to back it up. And I think the touchdowns will return. So.
Yeah, I mean, I have Kamara 4, but it's funny because I actually like him more than Zeke. I just think Zeke is the safer play because Kamara has, like you said, never rushed for 1,000 yards. But I think his upside is higher than Zeke's because if they do give him 200 yards or 200 carries, because he's never had 200 carries before in his career either.
Wow.
He had 194 in 2018. He had 171 last year.
Maybe I should change my projection. I have him at 201 rushing attempts.
Well, so if he plays all 16 games, he probably will get 200.
Let me pull that up and prorate it for you while you're talking about Kamara.
Yeah, because in 2018 he played 15 games and had 194, so he would have had probably 210 carries.
I'll do it off last year's numbers because those ones are without Ingram.
Yeah, that's fair. So last year he probably would have had 100
per 16, 195, close to 200, but that's including games he played a little bit of because of injury.
Like you said, touchdowns matter for Kamara. And he had 6 total touchdowns last year. I've said this before on the show. He had 18 total touchdowns in 2018. If he just cuts the difference and goes with 12 total touchdowns, and if he goes closer to 2018, like he has 13, 14, or 15 total touchdowns, he has a chance to be the RB1 in fantasy just because of his touchdown production and how heavily he gets involved in the passing game. Yeah. I mean, he's had 81 receptions every single year of his career. All 3 years of his career, he's had 81 catches. Last year, he had 533 yards. In 2018, he had 709. His first year in the league, he had 826. So his yards per reception have gone down every year. Again, if that just goes back up to what it was his first or second year, and his touchdowns go up, he has the chance to be on the same level as McCaffrey and Barkley. My only concern for Kamara is, one, he's been injured the last 2 seasons. Nothing major, but stuff that just misses a few games. Right. And then 2, if the touchdowns don't, if the touchdowns stay at around 6 or 7 and they don't go up to what they were in the past, he's probably not going to be a top 3 RB. He'll probably finish around 5 or 6.
So the ADP has been fluctuating lately on Sleeper as more people jump in. You have him at 4. I have him at 3. Right now, his ADP is 1006. He was a top 5 running back last week, but he is slipping behind Josh Jacobs.
I don't get that.
And Derrick Henry. So we'll have to see what happens. I mean, this is I think this is a half PPR 12 team league. Yeah. So that is a long fall for Alvin Kamara. I mean, if he falls between picks 8 to 10, yes, please. I'll take him all day. But yeah, that's a scary thing, especially when if you're using my draft rankings. You're drafting Zeke. You're drafting Kamara 4.
Yep.
So that's a little bit early, but for guys who are at the back end of the first,
I'm just saying if I had the 4th overall pick and Kamara's on the board, I would take Kamara. If the first 3 picks are McCaffrey, Barkley, Zeke, or
at 4 or 5, you take him.
Yeah, I'd take Kamara at 4 or 5.
Okay, let's talk Zeke. I have him 4. You have him 3. I'll tell you why I have him 4. I'm I'm a little bit what I was saying last year, what I didn't say about last year about Kamara. I'm a little bit nervous on this year for Zeke. Now, Ezekiel Elliott never. I'll tell you, for some, I've owned him for a majority of his career in most of my fantasy leagues, and the guy never scores touchdowns. It's annoying as hell because. Like last year, he had 14 total touchdowns, which is a lot.
Did have 14.
That's a lot.
That is a lot.
That's a lot better than years previous. Like
that's true. 2018.
He usually gets 9 or 10 all-purpose touchdowns, and last year he had 14, so it was an increase. And that's why I drafted him last year because I was like, the guy is a yards machine, and if he scores more touchdowns, it's simple. You know, he'll end up a top 3 running back. Now, I think the days of Zeke being a top 2 guy are in his past at this point. He's still a top 5 running back. He's still consistently there. The concern for me with Ezekiel Elliott is that he is going to lose work to Tony Pollard because Mike McCarthy is his play caller and Mike McCarthy is his head coach. Mike McCarthy had Aaron Jones, and it took him a whole friggin' season to figure out how to use the man. The only other time that he utilized a workhorse running back system was back when the Packers had was that fat running back Eddie Lacy? There he is. When they had him, and they gave him like 225 carries. So you could say Mike McCarthy maybe has never had a talent like Ezekiel Elliott come through, and that very well may be true. And I still have Zeke projected at 288 rush attempts for next year, but I do think that there is a very real possibility that Tony Pollard could reach up to 135, 140 rush attempts and put Zeke at like 250, 240. And with Zeke's lack of ability to score a lot of touchdowns like a Kamara might, or like, you know, a Saquon or Christian McCaffrey might at the 15, 16, 17 total, it could hurt Ezekiel Elliott quite a bit next year. And with Pollard being as good in the passing game as he is, I think Zeke is also going to get a little bit of less work through target share. I'm not saying that this will happen. I'm saying there's a possibility of this happening, which is why I have him 4, is that it's a little bit more of a risk to draft Zeke this year than it has been in the past, where if you were in that similar system or similar offense that you had last year and Ezekiel Elliott ended up being the top, 3 guy anyway, I think there's a chance that he falls to 5 or 6. I'm not predicting it. I think he's going to be 4, but there is a very large chance that he could get some opportunity regression, if that makes sense.
That's a fair argument. I'd like to play devil's advocate here, though, and make some counter arguments. Like, is this because you are agreeing with my points, or you disagree with my points, and this is the reasoning? So I do agree with what you're saying. My thing with Zeke, though, is first of all, his floor is going to be high no matter what. Even if he does regress, he's still at worst is going to get like 260 carries if he's healthy. Yeah, which is still like ridiculous, and like he's still guaranteed to at very least be a low end RB1. And like Kamara last year, who a lot of people took second overall, ended up being I think like the RB10. Fantasy. So like I don't even think his floor is that low. Like at worst I see him finishing as like the RB7. Okay. He's had 300 plus carries in every year of his career except for his second year where he only played in 10 games and he still had 242 carries in 10 games. And I know it's Mike McCarthy now, but like you said, Mike McCarthy has never had a running back like Zeke. And I know like he's had kind of the committee, like running back by committee, but he's also never had a player where he didn't really have a choice to not do that. Like he's never had a great running back at all. Okay. And with Zeke now, I think it's a guarantee that he's, and I still have him for less carries. I think I have Zeke at, I think 280, which is 21 less carries than he had last year. So I have him in small regression still, but even if you give him a regression, and the touchdown argument, I think is fair. He had 14 touchdowns last year. Year before that, he had 9. Yeah. So you're saying if he goes down, it might take away some points. But his rookie year, he had 16.
I mean, if Jordan Chun, who's their 3rd running back right now, was still the 3rd running back, was the 2nd running back on the team, I would not have a problem with Zeke. I think what they drafted in Tony Pollard is very good. And I think that like last year he had a higher efficiency running the football than Ezekiel Elliott did himself.
But that's partly because when Tony Pollard was on the field, the team would focus on
other positions. Right.
And
yeah.
that's another thing
that's fair.
I'd like to bring up too is I think the Cowboys offense, which was great last year and the best offense in the league and the most efficient, only got better with weapons wise with CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah.
They upgraded Randall Cobb with CeeDee Lamb. So I think like there's so many things to worry about with that Cowboys offense, and that's only going to help Zeke. But I do think the ceiling for Kamara is probably higher than Zeke. Like you said, the days of Zeke being a top 2 running back, I don't know. I don't think that's going to happen anymore. I'm kind of with you. I think he might this year, but if it's this year, if it happens this year, then it's going to be it for him.
Yeah.
He's only got like a year or two, maybe finishing in the top 2 or 3 guys, I think, just because of all the work that he's had over his career.
Okay. Let's talk about number 5 on our list, Dalvin Cook. Both of us have him at number 5, so that's a good thing. So I think for me, I had him like last year. He was absurd over the first couple weeks of the season. I think he was pacing out as he was the RB1 or RB1 or 2. Let me just check. But he was absurd over the first, 7 weeks of the season or so. And maybe I want to say, let's just say the first 8 weeks, he was number 2 running back behind Christian McCaffrey. And he was through the first 6 weeks of the season, the number 1 guy. So, or never mind, Christian McCaffrey was. You can't pass on Christian McCaffrey. But anyway, Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook was the number 1 guy. Was number 2 guy in all of fantasy football last year through a majority of the season, and then, obviously fell off in the latter half of the season. This offense has not changed. Nobody left in the coaching staff. Eric Kubiak's still calling the plays. Mike Zimmer is the head coach. They love to run the football. Last year,
Kevin Stefanski did leave.
Stefanski left, but Kubiak was the play caller last year too.
Yeah.
So Stefanski had an influence on the offense, but Kubiak was the assistant head coach, whatever, to Mike Zimmer. And I believe that's what they called him. But now he's the offensive coordinator full time. So I think Dalvin Cook will obviously get the same amount of rushing attempts that he had last year. Right now, I have him projected at 291 fantasy points, which puts him at number 3 in all of fantasy football for me and my projections, behind Barkley, behind McCaffrey. So I didn't put him at number 3 for specific reasons. I think that Dalvin Cook has a injury history.
Yep, it's almost a guarantee he gets hurt.
That could come back to bite him in the butt. I also think Kamara has a higher ceiling than Dalvin Cook may have this year, production-wise.
Catches.
Yeah, and I also think Kamara is probably in the better offense. And then Zeke is just a safe pick. I almost am willing to move Dalvin Cook up 1 ahead of Ezekiel Elliott, maybe put Zeke 5.
If you're looking for like the home run pick, I really wouldn't blame you at all.
But
for doing that.
I mean, for me, it's it's pretty close between Zeke and Dalvin. Like if you wanted to say, McCaffrey, Barkley, tier 1, Kamara, Zeke, Dalvin Cook, tier 2, then that's fine with me. But I just think that Dalvin Cook has a potential to be very, very good and a top 3 back again. But then there's the other side of it that's like there could be some regression in store for Dalvin Cook. I don't think his schedule, I can't remember if his schedule is easy or hard this year, but I'm pretty sure his schedule is not on the easy side. So for me, it's like Dalvin Cook. He has opportunity. He's got all of the stuff to cook with it, but you know what I mean?
He actually has the 4th easiest schedule.
4th easiest? Oh, jeez, man. And right now I have him tied at 14 touchdowns with a numerous amount of people. But, I think for him, there could be, for him, a lot of the season was that same situation with Alvin Kamara, where he does get the rushing yards more than Kamara does. But touchdowns was what held him up for a lot of the season last year. When those stopped happening, he stopped getting those 20-point games consistently. So I don't think he's going to regress all that much next year in the touchdown category, but it could be a little bit, which is why I'll probably have him around 5. I think that's a safer place to put him, but we'll see what happens with Dalvin Cook.
Yeah, that is the one thing. So the only 3 reasons I have for Dalvin Cook not being as high as Zeke or Kamara. So the reason I have him at 5 is because like I said, he has gotten injured every single year of his career.
Yeah.
First 3 years he's played 4 games his rookie year, 11 games his second year, and then 14 games this past year. Second of all is the holdout issue. If that is still an issue by the time August rolls around.
That was one of my reasons, and I forgot.
Yeah, that's not going to be good. And then my final reason with Cook is the touchdown regression. You look at what he did in 2018. He had 4 total touchdowns. Now he did only play 11 games, so he might have probably got like 5 or 6 total touchdowns, but it's not 13. Although I do think 13 feels more right with Dalvin Cook for the amount that they use him in that offense.
Okay.
If he does regression touchdowns like Kamara did and goes down to like 8 or 9, similar to what he did in 2018 versus 2019, then his ceiling isn't going to be as high as people think. But I do really love Dalvin Cook because if you just go like points per game last year, in the first like 12 weeks or whatever it was, like you were saying, he was right there with McCaffrey.
Yeah, it was him or McCaffrey, and McCaffrey continued the consistency, and he kind of fell off a little bit. So let's move on to the next guy. We'll talk about, because your list is more closer to the consensus than mine,
which I don't like,
which he doesn't like at all, by the way.
No.
But let's talk about Derrick Henry next, because I don't want to just keep following my list. So Derrick Henry, I have him 8. You have him 6. I have never been historically high.
No.
On Mr.
I'm actually surprised he's even 8 for you. That's
Mr. Derrick Henry. Now, I like Derrick Henry. Passed on him on the last episode to take Josh Jacobs.
Yeah,
I think I have Josh Jacobs ranked higher than him. I'm not sure though. But so right now I have on the season for Derrick Henry projections wise 256 fantasy points, 300 rushing attempts. The hard part is that he will probably only catch on I gave him a lot of receptions. 22.
For him, that's a lot.
That feels heavy.
I gave him 18, so he had 18 last year.
Yeah.
In 15 games. So if you give him an extra game, 22 might have been.
So, but awesome. Like that's where I'm kind of at with him is like in half PPR, he might touch the ball on the ground 300 times. And that in and of itself should put him in the top 10. But just the lack of like the big thing for me when I was doing the projections was I was like 300 rush attempts. And then I did the rushing touchdowns. I gave him 14 and the rushing yards, I gave him 1,400 rushing yards. And I was like, okay, it was looking good. And then I moved to targets and receptions. And I was like, oh, man, he has if he had any ability to catch the ball through the air, he would be up there with McCaffrey easily. But just the fact that he has a lack of ability to do anything through the air in the passing game. And it's not going to change. None whatsoever. So I think for me, Derrick Henry at 300, I believe he has a tougher schedule this year. Do you have the schedule thing pulled up so you can tell me?
Yeah, I can pull it up. Derrick Henry has the pages loaded. 8th easiest schedule.
Okay, yeah. So that sounds about right. I mean, it's kind of like high up there, but
divisions. Very weak divisions.
Yeah, but so I mean, for me, if a guy's touching the ball 310 times, you kind of you should feel safe drafting him, especially as good as Derrick Henry has been over the last 2 years. And the fact that he's the feature centerpiece of that offense, that's huge. But I don't think he passes 260 fantasy points this year, just because he doesn't get anything through the air. If he catches 40 passes this year through the air, then you can lock him at top 3, but that's not going to happen. So
with Derrick Henry, for me, for PPR, I actually have him a little bit
Where did you rank him, by the way?
What was that?
Where did you rank him, by the way?
I have him 6th.
Okay.
In half PPR. I think in PPR I have him like 8th or 9th. No, I dropped him a couple spots just because he's close to me. He's kind of in the same category. He's in the same tier as these guys that we're going to talk about, and not the guys that we have talked about. So I don't think he's in the same tier as like Zeke or Barkley or McCaffrey or Kamara or even Cook. When Dalvin Cook, hopefully the holdout situation happens, I would put him in the same tier as those first two guys. And then Henry for me drops a little bit, but again, he had 300 carries last year in 15 games. And the Titans are the exact same offense they were last year. And if anything, they let Dion Lewis walk to the Giants. So their second running back is a rookie
who is
known for kind of pass catching. So he's probably just going to play that role. So Henry, it seems like Henry's probably going to get 300 carries again. I think it's safe to assume if he's healthy, he'll get 300 carries. And he's not going to get crazy involved in the passing game, but he'll probably get 15 to 20 catches, maybe even 22 like you projected, which would be crazy. But just the fact alone that he's going to get those 300-plus carries should put him in the top 10 for you. And I think he's a safer guy because he will get you like 10 points a week. And he, like I was saying, he does play in a really weak division. He gets to play the Jaguars twice. He gets to play the Houston Texans twice, who, other than J.J. Watt, really don't have a great defense or front seven. And why am I blanking on? Oh, the Colts. The Colts have a decent defense. They actually have a pretty solid defense, but it's still not like, it doesn't scare you like the Ravens defense. So he plays in a pretty easy division. He has the 8th easiest schedule running back. So I think the yards per carry is still going to be very good because he's always had good yards per carry on the ground. I think he had 5.1 last. He had 5.1 last year and 4.9 the year before. I think he's probably going to be in that same range again. So I totally have no problem taking McCaffrey with like the 6th or 7th overall. I mean, Derrick Henry with like the 6th or 7th overall pick. I mean, I think it's okay to put him there. I just think when it's all said and done, like consistency wise for me too, he was a guy that got you like maybe 8 to 12 points a game. And then when he did score a touchdown, it was a big week. And he had Derrick Henry games where he scored over 30 and stuff like that. But I think it's going to be fewer far between for those large games, and you'll get more, inconsistent play from him. And the big games will save his totals. So 256 is where I have Matt, but I think he could be, I don't think he gets any better than that. Like I usually try to project guys in the middle. But I projected Derrick Henry at his ceiling, and I think that's really where he's at. There's a chance he probably falls to 225. Not probably, but there's a chance that he does fall to 225, and that could happen. But we'll have to see. Henry's another one of those safer picks.
He's another one of those. Yeah, he's those boring, safe picks. I'm not with those. That's why he's ranked 8 for me. So does boring win you championships? Sometimes we can. So let's talk about number 7, Nick Chubb, another guy that's a little bit for you, number 7, for me, number 10, a little bit of a discrepancy for us on this list. And then we'll get to the other two guys, 8 and 9 really quickly. But, I have Nick Chubb at 10. I don't like the Cleveland Browns, and I try so hard. I'll tell you, I try so friggin' hard to like the Browns. I really do. But then I project them, and I'm like, what is this?
I know. That's how I felt too when I do the team.
I have right now Nick Chubb at 272 rushing attempts, which is a lot. Around 5 yards a carry, which, like I said, a lot. He has 9 rushing touchdowns for me, and then I only pegged him at 35 targets because who's going to get all those targets? Kareem Hunt. And 25 receptions total on the season, 184 receiving yards and a touchdown. If Kareem Hunt gets hurt or traded or cut or whatever and he's not on the team, then I think you can easily compensate 20 to 30 more receptions for Nick Chubb. He's not bad through the air at all. I just think that there was a report earlier this week that Kareem Hunt has been a part of the passing game Zoom calls for the Cleveland Browns. So it's safe to say that this guy's going to be involved in the passing game and Nick Chubb just not.
Oh, absolutely.
So I think he's going to get opportunities in the passing game, but it's not going to be a lot. And I think that caps Nick Chubb a little bit. And then like offensive efficiency is huge for him. if the Browns are good offensively next year, Nick Chubb could score 14 touchdowns and end up being like if I bump right now, I have 9 rushing touchdowns. If we bump him up to 14 rushing touchdowns, it puts him at 256 right next to Derrick Henry, and he ends up being a top 7 running back in all of fantasy. But he has to score that many touchdowns to get there. So for me, I don't know that Nick Chubb can do that. I think people are over. I hate to say this because I'm a Nick Chubb fan, but I think people are overdoing it with Nick Chubb just a little bit. I think I'm projecting him right around his ADP, which is, or I have him ranked right around his ADP, which is like 12. Yeah, I could be wrong on that though. Hold on, let me check. Nick Chubb is right now, he's ADP 11.9. So yeah, I mean, number 10, not off the board, but number 10 on my running backs, it's a little bit heavier. But I think the upside for Chubb, unless Kareem Hunt gets hurt, is not as high as people think it is, unless he scores 20 touchdowns.
Can I make the argument for Nick Chubb?
Go ahead.
Because he is one of my favorite players. So
I love Nick Chubb too. I saw his yards per carry totals last year, and I ripped my pants off and ran around naked.
First of all, he is one of the best running backs in the league, just going off that. And you remember he did rush for 5 yards per carry, like you were saying, which is very good for running back, especially if you have 300 carries. And he did that with one of the worst offensive lines in the league.
Yeah.
They added,
That's true.
I think, Jedrek Williams with a 10th overall pick from Alabama to play tackle. And they also added Jack Conklin, I believe, who will probably play the other tackle.
Improvement in the offensive line.
And they added another depth piece as well. So they added 3 offensive linemen. 2 will probably be starters. The offensive line is much better. Kevin Stefanski is there, who's coming from a system that love to use Dalvin Cook, and especially on the goal line too. So I would assume Nick Chubb, and I think the team is going to be better. Their team is going to be more efficient because they were so underwhelming last year that if they just come back down to earth with all the talent that they have on that team, they should be more efficient. And if that happens, Nick Chubb will get more rushing touchdowns, especially on the goal line. And yes, I do think Kareem Hunt is going to take away targets from him, which is the only reason I don't have Chubb in the same category. Like, I want to put Chubb in my top 5, but just because of Kareem Hunt.
If Kareem Hunt wasn't there, I would most definitely have Chubb a little bit higher. I might even move him past, I might move him up to 9 ahead of another person we'll talk about in a minute, but yeah, I mean, I don't think Nick Chubb is any different than Derrick Henry, and he's getting less rushing attempts than Derrick Henry is. Stefanski could carry over that offense that they had in Minnesota, which would give him 290 rushing attempts, which is very,
Well, see, to me, he's like the same as Derrick Henry, because I think he will get 290 carries, because even when Kareem Hunt was there in those last 8 games, I think Chubb prorated to 288 carries. So if he gets 288 carries, that's only 12 less than Henry last year, or 15 less. So I think he'll still be really good on the ground. It'll be similar to what Derrick Henry did last year. The only difference is a little bit less touchdowns, which puts Henry above Chubb. Yeah. But overall, very similar.
Yeah. I mean, you make a fair argument for Nick Chubb. I do love Nick Chubb. The Browns every year,
No, I want
them to be good so badly, but I just do. I like I said, I think that's the middle for Nick Chubb. I think there's a ceiling of 256, 260, maybe 270 if he's very, very good in that offense. But then I think there's a lower floor for him where he could end up 11 or 12. So I mean, there's variances in where Nick Chubb could finish, but the difference for between 7 and 12, a lot of times the difference is 20 fantasy points, and so. That's a difference of 1, 2, 3 touchdowns, and that could be what Nick Chubb does this year and gets himself into the top 7, top 6, which is where you have him ranked. But right now, I think it's safer for me to pull him back. Maybe let somebody else take him unless he falls to the 10th running back off the board late, early in the second round in a 12-team. Then I'll snag Nick Chubb and be okay with it. But right now, the value at where Nick Chubb is going at pick 11 is a little bit too steep for my blood, but it's not. It's only 5 picks difference. So let's talk about the next person on our list. Let's talk about Kenyan Drake.
Okay.
You have Kenyan Drake at 9. I have Kenyan Drake at 7. Now that's only a difference of 2. Where does the ECR have him? That's the real question.
Probably like 9 or 10.
ECR has him at 11 right now in half PPR.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So we are both a little bit higher on him. I projected Kenyan Drake. You want to know, my friend, where this guy lands on my... You got to have one. You got to have one projected player.
It's Drake.
It's Drake for me. I went safe on a lot of guys, and Drake, you know how I feel about Kenyan Drake. He had 289 fantasy points on my projections, which ranked number 4.
289?
289, which ranks number 4 in my projections.
Wow.
So I gave him 254 carries. He has, I think, one of the easiest schedules in fantasy football. That could be wrong.
I just had the list.
I know. You always just have the list.
I just got rid of the list.
Mm-hmm. Why would you just get rid of it?
Dude.
Bro.
I don't know. Listen, sometimes my brain does stuff, and I don't know.
I do want to note, you always spell Kenyan Drake with an O.
Do I?
Yeah. It's Kenyan, dude.
Kenyan. He ranks 9. He has a 19 easiest schedule.
Okay, so in the middle, I guess. 3 stars according to Fantasy Pros. So if you take last year's games that he started for Arizona, right, and you prorate them, those I think it was 8 games, you prorate it for a 16-game season. He has 246 rushing attempts. I have him projected at 250, I believe. 1,286 rushing yards. I have him right around that point as well. And 16 rushing touchdowns with 70 targets and 56 receptions and around 1 touchdown through the air. I have him projected at 14 rushing touchdowns, about 18 all-purpose touchdowns, which is probably where the discrepancy is in the total number of fantasy points that he gets. But with 50 receptions and around 350 to 400 receiving yards on top of that 1,200 rushing yards that he gets, and I gave him less efficiency too, which is crazy. But he could finish as the RB4 in fantasy football, and this could be one of those guys that ascends into that conversation with, Dalvin Cook, Barkley, McCaffrey. Like last year, Dalvin Cook was a 2nd-round pick, and he exploded onto the scene. That could be Kenyan Drake this year. I think it's safer to say he probably would finish at 7 or 8 this season, which is where you have him ranked. And I have him ranked at 7, so it's like, that's safer, but there is a chance this guy explodes onto the scene this year and becomes a high-end running back if he stays healthy for the full season.
Absolutely. Does it scare you at all that he's never done that in his career?
No, he's too efficient not to do it in his career.
Yeah.
It's the one fantasy point per opportunity total that really gets me every time. And he's at 0.9 to 1, and that's very good. So, I mean, you know how much I love Kenyan Drake.
One of the things I love about Drake is, for one, like, I don't know how good the Cardinals are going to be this year. They're probably going to be like 8-8 or 7-9, but it's not going to be because of their offense. Their offense is really good. They're only like an offensive lineman or 2 away from being, and then just like Kyler Murray just developing from being one of the best offenses in football. And if you do prorate, like you said, what Drake did with Arizona last year, it's impressive. I don't think he's going to get 16 rushing touchdowns, even though I do love that offense.
No, right.
That does feel a little high. And then do you think he'll get like 250? I think it's possible he'll get 250. I think I projected him 240, so a little bit less, but still really good. I mean, if he stays healthy, and what we saw from what he did in Arizona last year, and he just does the same thing he did last year, even if he's a little less efficient with like touchdowns, then he's going to be a low-end RB1 this year.
Yeah, definitely.
And he's somebody who a lot of people are kind of bullish on because, he's never been an RB1. He's never really been a high-end RB2, to be honest. So there's going to be a lot of people that are going to take those better-known names, especially in redraft, over Kenyan Drake, and you might be able to snag him in the 3rd round, and he might be one of those classic 3rd-round running backs that everybody looks back at and says, why did he fall to the 3rd round?
Yeah. I think, right now Kenyan Drake is at pick.
I think he's a 2nd-round pick right now. But
yeah,
I would
late
be surprised
second round
in
pick.
redraft leagues if he goes.
He goes a little bit higher. That would not, yeah. But he's a late second, early third round pick, which is fantastic value. Yeah, I love Drake. Let's talk about the next guy. We got to move fast through. What is this? The last three.
Sure, we'll do it quickly then.
So right now, I have Myles Sanders, who's next on our list at 9, and you have him at 11. So I love Myles Sanders. I might pull him back a little bit. Maybe move Nick Chubb up ahead of him, and maybe Josh Jacobs, and have him in that same spot at 11 where you have him, just because they lost that offensive guard. But I'm going to talk about him as if that didn't happen. I haven't projected at 9, 216 rushing attempts. He doesn't reach 1,000 rushing yards. He only gets 11 touchdowns, I believe I projected him at. So it's not a blow it up season. I think the problem for me, and this is why I might move him down. The problem for me with Myles Sanders is that he is flying. We saw in our last show, we did a mock draft, 108. He is flying up draft boards, and it's getting scary. And I can't draft him at the place that he is. At a second round pick, that was the highest I'd go. And now he's going in the first round, and it's like people are just overdrafting him, and it's getting a little out of hand. Or not a little out of hand, a lot of hand.
When it was so fun to take Myles Sanders at the top of the 4th round?
Yeah, definitely. But now that's not going to happen. So do I think Myles Sanders is going to be an RB1? Yes. Do I think he's going to be a top 5 running back this year? No. And I think they're going to add a running back soon, whether it's Devonta Freeman or another backup running back. They're going to add somebody, and that's disconcerting. But I still think he ends up being the 9th or 10th running back overall in fantasy football. And I think it's safe to draft him as the 9th guy off the board. But if you're talking about taking him as the 7th running back off the board, no, don't do that.
He's somebody who's a very high risk, high reward player.
Yeah.
It's your type of player.
Yes.
I projected Sanders with the notion of them signing somebody else and getting like 120 carries, and he was still good. So I still think Sanders is going to be good even if they sign like a Devonta Freeman. I would like him less though for sure, but I think he'll still be good. Mm-hmm. But if they don't, and it's just Myles Sanders and Boston Scott, then I think he still has such a high ceiling, man. With the work that he could get in that offense that he's in, I mean, he has the chance.
Pure ceiling is why he should be a early second round pick. Just the pure fact that he has a high ceiling.
And the Eagles run a lot of plays. I think last year they usually run over 1,000 plays for the season. Mm-hmm. So even though they're going to throw the ball a lot, they're still going to run the ball a decent amount. So if they run the ball for let's say 450 times. Mm-hmm. I could still see Sanders getting like 240 carries because of that, 250 carries. So, because he is the only, I mean, I don't really count Boston. I think of Boston Scott. Mm-hmm. He'll get like 100 carries maybe, but that still wouldn't be enough to take 200 plus carries away from Sanders.
If they don't sign anyone, then it's all guns ablaze for Myles Sanders.
I am on the hype train though. Like if you believe in the reward for Sanders like I do and like you do, I think he's worth the pick in the second round.
So let's talk about...
But I agree with you, the hype, dude, is...
Yeah, it's crazy.
Crazy.
Let's talk about Josh Jacobs at number 11 for me and number 10 for you. And so I'll just... I mean, it's not that much of a difference. I'll talk about Josh Jacobs. I have him right now as my RB12 in half PPR projections, 223 fantasy points. I was a little bit surprised by the amount of opportunity that I have Josh Jacobs getting in that offense. The efficiency I didn't see there in terms of I want to go to Oakland and see how many, or not Oakland. Wow, lost.
It's okay. That's
lost
gonna happen
Vegas Raiders. Go to their projection sheet and see. I have them at 4.5 yards a carry, which was a little bit friendly. And it only put him at 1,200 rushing yards, 9 touchdowns, 1 receiving touchdown. So for him, he's one of those guys that has the upside. He has the ability to be a high-end player. I didn't do a lot of scouting on him before in terms of 2020. before I did my projections. So when I did them, I looked over all the numbers, all the analytics, and that's kind of where I put him at. He needs touchdowns. And the question is, are the Raiders going to be good? And I'm going to trend towards no.
Yeah.
Just because I don't think the Raiders suck. I think they'll win like 9 games. But I don't think their offense is going to be this prolific, high-powered offense that's going to run down the field. And if they turn into that for whatever reason, I'm wrong. And they turn into that. With all the
weapons that they've added, I mean,
Josh Jacobs is a sure top 6 running back. But for me, I don't think they get to that point. I don't think Josh Jacobs scores over 10 touchdowns. And I think that he'll be good this year. But I think that he's not going to be spectacular. And the thing that concerns me most is that people have been drafting Josh Jacobs right now in the, number 6 overall in fantasy football.
Yeah, I think it was Yahoo. I did a mock draft and he went 5th. Somebody took him 5th.
Yeah, so that's too much.
There is hype. You took him 10th in our draft. So that's not like completely crazy. For me, I love Josh Jacobs. I love the player. And I think the offensive line is very good too. And he had, in his rookie season as a 21-year-old, had 242 carries in 13 games. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me at all if he gets close to 300 carries this year. And if he does that, then watch out.
Yeah.
Touchdowns is a little concerning. He had 7 last year in 13 games. If you play the full season, give him
10.
3 extra games, he might get like 8, maybe 8 touchdowns. So then this year, I probably would put him at around, what do you have him, 10?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd probably have him around 10, 11 touchdowns. So that's not, RB, like high-end RB1 where you want him to be. So that kind of prevents me from putting him higher. And then the other thing that prevents me from putting him higher is just his involvement in the passing game. He had 20 catches last year and 27 targets. He probably won't get more than like 25, 30 catches, which isn't exactly where you want. He's kind of a similar player to Nick Chubb and Derrick Henry, where he's going to get a lot of carries. It's just, how is he going to be using the pass game? Now, he's young, though, and there isn't another pass-catching back there that really just completely focuses on pass catching. Jalen Richard kind of does, but I think Josh Jacobs could surpass Jalen Richard or Jalen Richard. Is it Jalen Richard?
I think.
I don't know. I think it's Jalen Richard. Whatever. Anyway, but Jacobs has the potential to pass him in the receiving game. Okay. but I don't know if he has the same involvement in the passing game as he did last year, then
it's going to be a tough season for him.
Yeah. I mean, it won't be tough. He'll still be good, but he won't be like top 5.
Right. Well, I think in terms of tough, I don't mean for him. He would give a crap about how many statistics he gets. I'm talking about like fantasy owners drafting him 6, end up getting an RB2. That's going to be bad news. So did we talk about Joe Mixon?
I think you might have skipped Joe Mixon.
Dang.
We did.
So let's talk about Joe Mixon. I thought we were on our last guy, but I guess Joe Mixon is here. So Joe Mixon, I love Joe Mixon, and I have him right now at 6. You have him at 8.
Yeah, I still really like him. I think he's 6 in PPR for me.
So I have him at 7 in all of fantasy football for next year, projected wise. 266 fantasy points ahead of Derrick Henry and Myles Sanders. He went number 5, I believe, in our mock draft on Tuesday, or PPR mock draft. Now, he had, this was one of those guys that did not have a great season last year. But when I looked at how many rushing attempts he had, I was like, whoa, that is absurd.
Yeah.
And so I project him at 275, which you'll be like, oh my God, that's a lot. But go look at his numbers last year. That's not going to change. He literally, this is what I like so much about Joe Mixon. He is literally the Todd Gurley to the Rams, like when they went to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
That is how good he can be.
Team, yeah.
With that Zach Taylor team. And I was like, last year, I'm like, is Zach Taylor going to run the offense very similar to how Sean McVay did? And I looked at all the metrics and I'm like, he did exactly what Sean McVay did. Carbon copy dropped in the Bengals offense. And for me, Joe Mixon, holy smokes, if he gets 300 plus opportunities, The only thing holding him back is the amount of touchdowns that he scored. I have him projected at 13 touchdowns. So, but like for me, if he has a Todd Gurley-like season, and this is where the line is drawn for me, if he has a season where they give him the ball so many times in the red zone that he ends up scoring, 16, 17, 18 touchdowns, that is the difference between him being a top 7 running back and a top 3 running back. And I think to get Joe Mixon at pick 12 right now is asinine.
That's great.
It's crazy. And it's like you get him at pick 12. That is such a high value that guy could ascend. He could be the Dalvin Cook of this year. Like, I honestly believe it.
Yeah.
Like, if there's any guy on this list that is going to be Dalvin Cook from 2019, it's going to be Joe Mixon.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. They're bringing in their first round pick last year. I forget his name, but they drafted a left tackle, I believe, last year with the 10th overall pick. Got injured in training camp, so it's an offensive lineman addition to the Bengals, so that will help Mixon. Hopefully his yards per carry. And they were also, again, the Bengals stunk last year.
Right.
Were beyond bad, and teams were just like, just stop Joe Mixon. He's their
better
own
offensive
weapon.
line,
with
Joe Burrow
there and a healthy AJ Green, maybe that can help his yards per carry for this year. And if he still gets like 270, 280 carries, that's going to be big. Right. Touchdowns, I do think will go up a little bit because I think the offense is better, but I don't know if he can get like in the teens for total touchdowns, which is why I don't know if he's going to be like Dalvin Cook. But I do think he has that ceiling because if he does get the touchdowns, then he's going to be really, really good.
Oh yeah.
But he had 9 touchdowns in 2018, 8 touchdowns for total touchdowns last year. So I think he'll probably get like 11 or 12 total touchdowns. So, which is why I do have him like around 6 or 7 or 8, like in that range. But for him to be in the top 5, he's going to need like 13, 14, 15 total touchdowns.
Agreed. I wish we could spend more time on Joe Mixon. We'll probably talk about him 100 times before the season starts. But let's talk about our last 2 guys really quickly, split them off.
Okay.
Leonard Fournette, Aaron Jones. I have Fournette 12. You have Aaron Jones 12. 2 different guys. I think you have Fournette 13, and I have Aaron Jones 13.
I have Fournette 14. Actually.
Okay, all right.
I have Eckler 13.
So I just want to quickly argue my Leonard Fournette take. Leonard Fournette is probably one of my favorite running backs in the NFL. He's efficient.
He is, yeah.
Yes, he always is. He is efficient on the ground, gets a lot of yardage. There's no one behind him right now outside of. They brought in Chris Thompson, who I think is going to take some of the passing game work away from Leonard Fournette, but I still think he's going to get a lot of passing game work. The question for me with Leonard Fournette is not opportunity, because he's going to get 250 rush attempts. He's going to get 50 receptions. Like, that's a lock. He'll get 300 touches this year. I will bet a whole fantasy league on it. But for me, the question is, like, last year he had 4 total touchdowns, I think, on the whole season. Had he just scored 6 more touchdowns, he would have been in the top 3 with the Dalvin Cooks of the world and, stuff like that. But he just didn't get to that point. So the question is, does he score more touchdowns this year? And how good or bad is that offense? And I think that remains to be seen. Like, I think Jacksonville as a whole will probably suck, but I think that offense will be pretty decent. I think it'll be middle of the road. And I think Fournette will probably get into the end zone a few more times this year than he did last year. I have him as the RB15 in projections, but I only projected him at 7 touchdowns. I think his ceiling is a little bit higher in that aspect. So I think as the 12th running back off the board for me, that's a safe pick. And especially when you're talking about a guy, who you can get, in the middle of the 3rd round in a 12 team, getting 300 touches. I mean, I'll take that.
Yeah. So for me, for my argument do you want me to argue Aaron Jones?
Yeah, just talk about Aaron Jones real fast.
Yeah. So for me, Aaron Jones, we both were fading him, especially when he was in the 1st round. After doing my projections, though, and seeing kind of where he's going now, like, we weren't the only ones fading him. The whole fantasy community was fading him. But I think where he's going now it's fine. I think middle of the 2nd round, middle to late 2nd round, which is where I've seen him going in most drafts, is a good spot. He's obviously not going to get 19 touchdowns again. Like, that's not going to happen.
I mean, he might.
Unlikely. I highly doubt it. I really highly doubt that he'll get 19.
Right.
I don't even know if he'll get 15 total touchdowns. I think he's going to go down to like 12 to 13. But even if he does that, he's going to be like a low end. He's going to be a high end RB2 pretty much to low end RB1 because he's still going to get 50 receptions. He's still going to get about like 400 receiving yards and 3 or 4 receiving. Like his receiving game is not going to change. If anything, it's going to be. He might be the second target passing the ball wise behind Devontae Adams. They have no weapons on that team.
Yeah,
they brought in Devin Funches. They have Alan Lazard, but there's really no weapons on that team. So Aaron Jones is going to be very involved in the passing game.
Yeah,
as he was last year. So I don't think that will change, which will keep Aaron Jones at that, being worth a pick in the second round. He will have less rushing touchdowns though, and his efficiency will probably go down with touchdowns, but everything else, like, I don't think is going to change too much. And he finished as like the RB3 last year. Yeah, I believe. So if you just take his touchdowns and drop them like 4 or 5, even 6 touchdowns, he's going to go from like the RB3 to like the RB12 range, which is why I have him there.
Yeah. Sounds good. That'll conclude our top 12 running backs. If you want to see the rest of our running back rankings, be sure to buy the draft guide and check out our rankings, our full draft rankings inside the draft guide on July 1st. Don't forget to check out our website at thefantasychampions.com. And then be sure to follow us on Twitter at the FF Champs, on Instagram at the Fantasy Championships. And we will talk to you on Thursday where we talk about a little boring of a topic, quarterbacks for the 2020 season.
Oh, I love quarterbacks. Let's go.
Talk to you Thursday, Fantasy Champs.
See you guys.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Champions podcast. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes and YouTube and follow us on Twitter at the FF Champs.